Sometimes the fiercest storms hide the most unexpected blessings. In the brutal winter of 1887, as an unforgiving snow whipped across the Dakota Territory, a woman named Sarah Whitford waited for a train that might never come, clutching a canvas bag filled with vials and a worn notebook, years of caring for critters etched within its pages. The wind howled like an angry beast, seeping through the cracks of the small Redwood Crossing station. Sarah Whitford tightened her shawl around her shoulders, her fingers numb with cold as they clutched the handle of her canvas bag. Inside, vials of tinctures and salves clinked softly with each gust, accompanied by the reassuring weight of her brown leather notebook, that silent companion that held years of observations, remedies, victories, and failures in the art of mending animals. She'd never studied in a veterinary school. Women weren't admitted anyhow, but her hands knew the secret language of wounds. Her eyes could read the gaze of a suffering beast, and her heart had learned to carry the responsibility for every life she tried to save. The ranch in Kansas where she'd worked for 3 years had just been sold. The new owner didn't want a woman caring for his prize horses, preferring to wait for a real doctor to come from town. Sarah had packed her things without a word, holding on to her dignity like a coat against the humiliation. Now sitting on that rough-hewn wooden bench, she watched the snow pile up on the tracks. The train for the east was supposed to have arrived 2 hours ago, but the storm seemed determined to erase all paths, all hopes, all possibilities of escaping this hostile territory. Her savings were dwindling. Her stomach rumbled with hunger. And somewhere, in the icy silence of that abandoned station, Sarah Whitford felt for the first time in her life that the courage that had always carried her was starting to flicker like a candle flame in the wind. She pulled out her notebook, opening it to a random page. Her eyes fell on an entry from the previous summer. Bay mare. Tough birthing. Foal saved after 4 hours of labor. Mother licked my hand in thanks. A melancholy smile touched her lips. Even in the biting cold, that memory warmed something deep inside her. That's when she heard footsteps crunching on the hard-packed snow. A man emerged from the swirling whiteout, his figure hazy at first, then sharper as he approached. He was tall, with broad shoulders that seemed to carry the weight of many winters, and wore a heavy wool coat dusted with flakes. His face, weathered by the elements and hard labor, expressed a quiet kindness that Sarah recognized immediately, that particular way some folks have of looking at the world without judgment. "Ma'am," he said, lifting his hat slightly, revealing brown hair streaked with gray. "The train won't be coming today. Might not be for a few days with this storm." Sarah nodded without surprise. She'd guessed as much from the howling wind that sounded like it wanted to rip the station roof off. "Name's Luke Harris," the man continued. "My farm's just 2 miles from here. You can't stay out here in this weather." There was a disarming simplicity in his voice, devoid of that condescension Sarah had too often heard. No "poor little lady," or "you shouldn't be traveling alone." Just an offer of shelter as natural as sharing one's bread. "I wouldn't want to trouble you," Sarah replied. But the wind chose that moment to slam the station door with a violence that rattled the window panes. Luke Harris smiled, a rare, sparing, but genuine smile. "The only thing that would trouble me is knowing someone was freezing out here when I've got a roof, a fire, and hot soup." Sarah hesitated. She'd learned to be wary of the kindness of strangers, especially from men. Too often, it hid less noble intentions. But something in his gaze reassured her. Perhaps it was the way he kept a respectful distance, not invading her space, patiently waiting for her answer. "I can help you with your things," he offered, seeing her bag. "No, thank you. I can manage just fine." She stood up, adjusting her shawl. "But I'll accept your offer of shelter. My name is Sarah Whitford." They walked in silence through the deep snow, following a path only Luke seemed to see. The wind whipped at their faces, but Sarah noticed that the man naturally adjusted his stride to hers, slowing when she struggled through the drifts, stopping when she needed to catch her breath, never making her feel like she was holding him back. Around a bend, past a stand of firs bending under the snow's weight, a small farm appeared. The main house, modest but sturdy, cast a warm, golden light from its windows. Beside it, a smaller structure, likely an old workshop or storage shed, let out a thin wisp of smoke from its chimney. "The little house out back," Luke said, pointing to the small building. "It's simple, but it's got everything you need. A bed, a stove, a place to cook. You'll have your peace there. Sarah felt something within her unclench. Not the big house where she would have been at the mercy of her host, but a space of her own, an autonomy respected even in dependence. The little house smelled of dry wood and lavender. A fire already crackled in the stove, spreading a welcome warmth that melted the tension from Sarah's shoulders. Luke had lit the kerosene lamp and checked that the water tank was full before placing a pot of still-warm soup on the rough wooden table. "My wife used to grow lavender," he said simply, seeing Sarah inhale the scent with a small smile. "The smell still lingers even after all these years." He spoke of his wife in the past tense, and Sarah understood without him needing to explain. Death always left that particular imprint in the voices of survivors, a tenderness mixed with resignation that never lied. "I'll leave you to settle in," Luke continued. "If you need anything, the main house is right there. And tomorrow, when the storm lets up, I'll take you to Black River Farm. They're looking for someone who has a way with animals." Sarah looked up, surprised. "How do you know Your bag," Luke said with a faint smile. "It smells of remedies and salves. And then, you've got that way of looking at my horses in the stable, not like someone who's scared, but like someone who's trying to understand." Once alone, Sarah sat on the simple but comfortable bed and opened her notebook. By the lamplight, she wrote in neat handwriting, "January 15th, 1887. Blizzard at Redwood Crossing. Welcomed by Luke Harris, widowed farmer, a man of few words but great kindness. Offer of work at Black River Farm. First glimmer of hope since leaving Kansas." She closed the notebook and clutched it to her chest. This little brown book was more than a collection of notes. It was tangible proof of her worth, of everything she had learned and accomplished. In a world that refused to recognize her skills, this notebook was her diploma, her certificate, her legitimacy. The next morning, Sarah was woken by an unusual quiet. The wind had died down. Through the frosted window pane, she saw a transformed landscape. The snow had resketched the world in soft shimmering curves, and the sun made each flake glitter like scattered diamonds. Luke was waiting near the main house, holding the reins of two horses. "They know the way," he said, helping her into the saddle. "And they're good-tempered." The ride to Black River passed in comfortable silence, punctuated only by the horses' breathing and the crunch of their hooves on the packed snow. Sarah observed the landscape with new eyes. This territory that had seemed hostile the day before now revealed its wild beauty and the promise of new beginnings. "Why are you helping me?" she finally asked. Luke remained silent for a long moment, as if weighing his words. "Because I recognized something in you. That way of carrying your burdens without breaking down. My wife had that too." He paused, then added, "And then, good folks are few and far between. When you come across one, you don't let them go." Black River Farm stretched as far as the eye could see, its sturdy buildings and neatly kept corrals testifying to an earned prosperity. Sarah felt her heart quicken at the sight of the many horses grazing in the paddocks, their coats steaming slightly in the cold morning air. Thomas Mitchell, the foreman, was an old man with white hair and sharp eyes that measured people at a glance. He greeted Luke with a respectful nod, then turned to Sarah with that dubious expression she knew too well. "So, this is her, the specialist," he said, the last word pronounced with an edge of irony. "Sarah Whitford," she replied, extending a firm hand. "I'd like to see your animals." Mitchell raised an eyebrow, but something in Sarah's quiet confidence seemed to pique his curiosity. "All right then, follow me." They first walked through the main stable, where a dozen draft and saddle horses occupied spacious stalls. Sarah moved slowly, stopping before each one. She didn't just look, she observed. The way a horse carried its weight, the gleam in its eyes, the texture of its coat, the regularity of its breathing. "This one limps slightly on its left foreleg," she said, stopping before a magnificent bay. "Not recent. Probably an old, poorly healed injury that bothers it in damp weather." Mitchell frowned. Nobody else had noticed that subtle limp. They continued the tour. Sarah identified a pregnant mare close to term, pointed out a possible developing eye infection in a foal, and suggested a change in diet for a gelding showing signs of digestive fatigue. "How can you know all that just by looking at them?" Mitchell asked, his initial skepticism giving way to professional curiosity. Sarah pulled out her brown leather notebook and opened it to a page covered with detailed diagrams. 15 years of observation, she said simply. Every animal tells its story if you know how to listen. The decisive test came when they reached the stall of a magnificent but visibly agitated black stallion. This one's been a problem for us for weeks, Mitchell admitted. He won't let anyone near him, isn't eating right. The town vet says we should sell him before he gets dangerous. Sarah approached the stall slowly, keeping her hands visible and speaking in a soft voice. The stallion whinnied and backed away, but she didn't move, simply staying put, patient. Then, gradually, she slowly extended her hand toward him. After many long minutes, the horse cautiously advanced and sniffed her fingers. Sarah examined his eyes, his ears, then nodded. He's got a toothache. An infected molar, probably. That's why he won't eat and why he's turned aggressive. The pain makes him wary. Mitchell looked at Luke, then at Sarah. Can you treat him? With the right tools and a little patience, yes. Then you're hired, Mitchell said. $15 a month, room and board if you want it. When can you start? Right now, Sarah replied, feeling a deep joy flood over her for the first time in months. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm in Sarah's life. Her days were divided between Black River Farm, where her reputation grew with every animal she healed, and Luke's small property, where she cared for his few animals and helped him with his corn and oat crops when the weather allowed. That's how a silent collaboration was born between them. Luke never talked much, but his actions spoke for him. He'd make strong coffee in the morning before she left for Black River. He'd quietly mend the paddock fence where she examined her horses. He always left a bit of dry wood by her door when the evenings promised to be particularly cold. For her part, Sarah discovered a peace she'd never known. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to constantly justify her presence or her skills. At Black River, her results spoke for themselves. At Luke's, she was simply accepted just as she was. One March evening, returning from the farm later than usual after assisting with a difficult foaling, she found Luke sitting on the steps of her little house, holding 2 steaming cups of tea. Success? He asked, handing her a cup. Mare and foal are doing well, Sarah replied, sitting beside him. But it was a long haul. They drank in silence, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The spring wind carried the scent of the awakening earth, mingled with the lingering lavender scent that still sometimes drifted from the little house. Sarah, Luke said finally, his voice deeper than usual. I need to tell you something. She turned her head toward him, surprised by the seriousness of his tone. These past few months, your being here, it's changed something. He hesitated, searching for his words. My wife died 5 years ago. Since then, I thought that part of me died with her. But you reminded me that you can start over without betraying what you've loved. Sarah felt her heart clench. She'd felt that sweet tension grow between them. That way Luke sometimes looked at her, that awkward tenderness she recognized in his gestures. Luke, she began. I'm not asking anything of you, he interrupted softly. I just wanted you to know that you're not just a guest here anymore. You're home if you want to be. The silence stretched between them, but it was no longer a silence of waiting. It was a silence of mutual understanding. Sarah placed her hand on Luke's, feeling the roughness of his work-worn palms. I've spent my life being too different, too independent, too me, she said at last. No one ever truly wanted that woman. Not really. I do, Luke replied simply. That night, Sarah opened her notebook to a blank page and wrote, March 15, 1887. Today, I understood what it means to be accepted unconditionally. Luke Harris is a rare man. He doesn't try to change me. He loves me just as I am. The summer of 1887 brought stifling heat that made fieldwork particularly grueling. Sarah had developed a well-established routine. Mornings at Black River, where her reputation as a healer solidified day by day. Afternoons at Luke's, caring for his animals and helping him with his corn and oat crops. Their relationship had evolved naturally, like a plant finding its way to the light. They hadn't rushed into grand declarations or dramatic gestures. Instead, they had built something solid in the everyday. Lingering glances, hands brushing when passing tools, conversations that stretched on late into the evening on the porch. It was an unexpected event that hastened things. On a particularly scorching July day, Sarah was called urgently to Black River. A highly valuable cow was giving birth, but something was wrong. The town veterinarian was away, gone to treat a wealthy rancher's horses 3 counties over. When Sarah arrived, she found the cow lying on her side, exhausted and distressed. The calf was presenting poorly and time was pressing. All the farm hands had gathered around the pen, including Luke, who had come for news. "I'm going to need help," Sarah said, rolling up her sleeves. "And a lot of patience." For 3 hours under the blazing sun, Sarah fought to save both mother and calf. Her arms disappeared up to her elbows inside the animal, gently guiding the calf toward the exit. Sweat stung her eyes, soaked her dress, but she didn't give up. Luke stayed by her side the entire time, handing her instruments, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. Finally, with a final effort, the calf slid into her hands. It didn't stir. Sarah quickly turned it over, cleared its airways, vigorously rubbed its wet coat. For long seconds, that felt like an eternity. Nothing. Then, suddenly, a small cough, a breath, and the calf opened its eyes. A cheer erupted from the onlookers. The cow, exhausted but alive, began to lick her calf. Sarah collapsed onto the straw, trembling with exhaustion and emotion. "Unbelievable," Mitchell, the foreman, murmured. "Never seen anything like it." That evening, when Sarah and Luke returned to the farm, they were both silent, still reeling from what they'd just been through. But it was a silence charged with electricity, with mutual admiration, with something that begged to be said. "Sarah," Luke said, stopping in front of the little house, "what you did today, what you are, I've never known anyone like you." She turned to him, and in the golden light of the setting sun, she saw in his eyes everything she'd ever hoped to find there. Love, but also respect, admiration, pride. "Luke Harris," she said, stepping closer to him, "will you marry me?" He laughed, surprised by her directness, then pulled her into his arms. "Yes, Sarah Whitford. 1,000 times yes." The wedding took place in September, with the simplicity that suited their love. No grand ceremony, but an intimate celebration in Luke's farmyard, witnessed by neighboring families and the Black River employees who had learned to respect Sarah. Pastor Henley, an elderly man of moderate convictions, blessed their union under a perfectly clear autumn sky. Sarah transformed the little house out back into a proper veterinary practice. The walls were lined with shelves for her remedies, surgical instruments, and animal medicine books she ordered from back east. Her brown leather notebook held pride of place on the wooden desk she'd set up, always open, ready for new observations. Farmers from the surrounding area started making the detour to consult Harris's woman doctor, as they called her, with a mix of curiosity and growing respect. Sarah didn't just treat anymore, she taught. She showed young shepherds how to spot the first signs of illness, explained life-saving techniques to farm wives during difficult birthings. But this growing success didn't go unnoticed. In the shadow of this nascent prosperity, whispers began to spread. One October morning, as Sarah was examining a horse at Black River, a man she didn't know approached her. Elias Corman was tall and slender, with pale eyes that seemed to look right through people and a melodious voice that commanded attention. He introduced himself as the new spiritual leader of a religious group that was gaining traction in the region. "Mrs. Harris," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "your activity is causing quite a stir in the community." Sarah looked up from the foreleg she was bandaging. "I hope for the good, Mr. Corman, Elias Corman. And yes, your talents are undeniable. But you see, some folks are questioning the natural order of things." Those words rang like a warning in the crisp autumn air. Sarah felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cooling weather. At this point in our story, allow me to invite you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any episodes of this moving saga. Sarah's story is only just beginning to reveal its deepest secrets. That evening, Sarah told Luke about the encounter. He frowned, visibly concerned. "Corman," he repeated thoughtfully. "I've heard about him. He holds meetings on Sunday evenings, talks about returning to traditional values. His sermons are attracting more and more people." "What does he mean by natural order?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer. Luke pulled her into his arms. "Don't you worry your head about that. You're doing good for folks, that's all that matters. But Sarah couldn't shake Elias Corman's cold smile or his carefully chosen words from her mind. She'd been through this before, admiration turning to suspicion, respect shifting to mistrust. She knew the storm clouds were gathering. The winter of 1888 settled in with a deceptive mildness, but Sarah felt that particular tension in the air that precedes big storms. Business was booming. Her reputation stretched into neighboring counties, and yet something had changed in the way people looked at her. Everything shifted dramatically on a freezing February morning. Sarah was called urgently to Black River for a highly valuable horse, a purebred stallion the owner had paid a fortune for. The animal presented alarming symptoms: fever, refusing to eat, labored breathing. Sarah examined the beast thoroughly, consulted her notebook, and prepared a treatment based on her experience and the latest knowledge she had acquired. She stayed at the stallion's side for 3 days, adjusting the treatment as symptoms changed, watching day and night. Luke came to bring her hot meals and clean clothes. Mitchell himself seemed confident in her abilities. But on the 4th morning, Sarah found the stallion dead in its stall. The news spread like wildfire. A $1,000 horse, dead under the care of the woman doctor. Elias Corman didn't waste time showing up at Black River, surrounded by a few of his faithful followers. His voice carried far across the farmyard. "See where pride leads," he declared for anyone who would listen. "When you defy the order established by the Creator, when you put women where they don't belong, this is the result." This death was predictable. Sarah, kneeling by the dead horse, felt eyes on her like silent accusations. She had done everything by the book, she was certain. But in this world where a woman had to be perfect to be simply accepted, a single failure was enough to undo months of success. "An investigation is needed," Corman continued. "Negligence, incompetence, who knows, maybe even malice." Mitchell, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward. "Elias, you're going too far. Sarah did everything humanly possible." "Humanly possible for a woman, perhaps," Corman retorted with a venomous smile. "But that animal deserved the care of a real veterinarian." That night, Sarah went home heartbroken. She sat at her desk and opened her notebook to the page where she had recorded all her care. Every detail was there: the symptoms observed, the remedies administered, the hours of monitoring. Everything was correct. She knew it. But how could she prove her innocence in the face of death? Luke found her there, hunched over her notebook, her eyes red from unshed tears. "It's not your fault," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "I know," Sarah murmured. "But they don't know it. Or don't want to know it. Corman's just looking for an excuse to harm you. He sees you as a threat to his influence." Sarah closed her notebook with a weary gesture. "Maybe I've been too ambitious. Maybe I should—" "No," Luke interrupted firmly. "You're not giving up. Not now. Not because of him." But Sarah already felt the foundations of her new life shaking beneath her feet. The weeks following the stallion's death turned Sarah's life into a silent ordeal. The Guardians of the Flock, that's what Elias Corman had named his movement, held increasingly frequent meetings in the community hall. Their sermons cleverly mixed religion and politics, preaching a return to natural roles where women belonged in the home. Sarah watched her clientele dwindle day by day. Some farmers she'd been treating for months now looked away when they crossed paths in town. Others canceled their appointments without explanation. Even at Black River, the atmosphere had changed. Mitchell remained loyal, but she sensed whispers rising as she passed. One particularly windy March morning, Luke received an unexpected visitor. The man standing on the doorstep was well-dressed, wearing a city suit and a gold watch that gleamed in the sun. He introduced himself as Harold Pemberton, a representative of the First Territorial Bank. "Mr. Harris," he said with a smile that inspired no trust. "I'm here about your mortgage." Luke felt his blood run cold. "We're up to date on our payments." "Oh, certainly. But you see, the bank recently changed management. The new board of directors has decided to review all outstanding loans. Your land, fertile as it may be, now presents certain risks." "What risks?" Luke asked, though he was beginning to guess the answer. "Well, it seems your wife is engaged in controversial activities that harm the reputation of your property. This affects the value of our collateral." Sarah, who had heard the conversation from the kitchen, appeared in the doorway. "How do my animal treatments harm the value of this land?" Pemberton looked at her condescendingly. "Madam, when a property becomes the center of religious and social controversy, it discourages potential buyers. The bank must protect its interests." "How much?" Luke asked curtly. "The full loan, $800, due in 60 days. After Pemberton left, Sarah and Luke remained silent in their kitchen, the weight of this new hardship pressing on their shoulders. $800 was more than their combined savings. "It's Corman," Sarah finally said. "He's got influence over this bank." Luke nodded grimly. "His sermons are attracting more and more prominent citizens. The mayor, the judge, now the bankers." That evening, Sarah took out her notebook and wrote with a trembling hand. "March 15th, 1888. The storm I'd sensed is upon us, hitting us full force. We risk losing the farm, our home, everything we've built. Elias Corman isn't content to merely attack my reputation anymore. He's attacking our very survival." She closed the notebook and clutched it to her chest. For the first time since arriving in the Dakota, Sarah Whitford seriously considered defeat. Perhaps it was time to give up this uneven fight, to leave and start over somewhere else, far from this community that was turning against her. Outside, the spring wind still carried the lingering scent of winter, as if nature itself hesitated between rebirth and desolation. The tension in the Harris home was palpable, like the heavy air that precedes summer storms. But an even more personal conflict was added to their trials. One April morning, their eldest son, James, 19, the natural heir to the farm according to Luke, made an announcement that shook the very foundations of the family. "Father, I don't want to work the land anymore," he declared at breakfast, his words dropping like stones into the morning silence. "I want to go to Chicago. To study. To see the world. To build my own life." Luke slowly set down his coffee cup, his knuckles white as he tried to contain himself. "This land has belonged to our family for 15 years. It will be yours someday. But I don't want it, Father. I respect what you've built, but it's not my dream." The silence that followed was so thick you could hear heartbeats. Luke stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "After all I've sacrificed to build this legacy, after all we've endured." "Luke," Sarah interjected softly. "No," he exploded, turning to her. "Don't tell me you support him in this betrayal." For the first time since their marriage, Sarah saw anger directed at her in her husband's eyes. She felt something break inside her, a trust that had seemed unshakable moments earlier. "I'm not saying I support him," she replied calmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "I'm saying I understand him." "You understand him?" Luke repeated, incredulous. "You who fought to make your place here, you understand that he wants to abandon everything?" "Precisely because I fought. I know the importance of choosing one's own path." James looked at his parents with a torn expression. "I don't want to hurt you, but I can't live your life for you." That night, Luke slept in the barn. Sarah stayed awake in their empty bed, listening to the wind whistling through the floorboards of the house. For the first time since their marriage, she felt completely alone. The following days were marked by a cold that had nothing to do with the weather. Luke and Sarah barely spoke, their exchanges limited to practical necessities. The farm kept running, but the soul had left their home. One evening, Sarah found Luke sitting on the porch steps watching the sunset tint the fields golden. She sat beside him, as they had done so many times before. "I can't lose my son too," he finally said, his voice broken. "I already lost my first wife. Now they want to take the farm. If James leaves, what will I have left?" Sarah felt tears well up in her eyes. "You'll have me, if you still want me." Luke turned his head to her and she saw in his eyes all the accumulated pain of the past few weeks. "Sarah, I'm scared. Scared that everything will fall apart. Scared of losing everything that gives meaning to my life." "Then let's hold on to what truly matters," she murmured, taking his hand. "Our love, our family, even if it doesn't look like what we imagined." May arrived with an early heat that turned the days into tests of endurance. Sarah felt crushed by the weight of hostile glances, the whispers that stopped as she passed, the heavy silence that settled when she entered a room. Even her relationship with Luke, though reconciled on the surface, still bore the scars of their argument. One evening, when loneliness weighed on her more than usual, Sarah did something she had never done before. She didn't light the lamp when she came in. She sat in the darkness of her little house-turned-practice, surrounded by her instruments and remedies that now seemed to accuse her of powerlessness. For the first time since arriving in the Dakota, Sarah Whitford seriously considered defeat. She thought of leaving, of disappearing into the night just as she had arrived in that winter storm. Maybe Corman was right. Maybe she didn't belong here. That she had been wrong to believe she could build something lasting. The tears she'd held back for weeks finally began to fall, silent in the darkness. She hugged her knees to her chest, curling up just like that first night at Redwood Crossing Station. That's when she noticed the envelope slipped under her door. With a trembling hand, she lit the lamp and opened the letter. The handwriting was neat, feminine, and she immediately recognized the signature. Mary Hutchinson, a young woman she had trained 3 years prior to care for the family farm's horses. "Dear Sarah," the letter began, "I have heard of the difficulties you are going through and my heart aches for you. I wanted you to know that what you taught me has changed my life. Thanks to you, I was able to save our best stallion last winter, and my father has finally trusted me to manage part of the breeding. But more importantly, you showed me that a woman can be more than what society expects of her. You once told me that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to keep going despite it. If you fall now, all the women who look to you as a model fall a little with you. But if you hold strong, if you stand tall against this storm, you help us all rise. I am just a farmer among many, but I wanted you to know that you are not alone. There are others like me, who admire you in silence, who pray for your success. Don't abandon them. Don't abandon us." Sarah read and reread the letter, feeling something rekindle within her. It wasn't just her own survival at stake anymore, but that of all the women who looked to her to break the chains of tradition. She pulled out her brown leather notebook and wrote with a firmer hand than she had in weeks. May 15th, 1888. I almost gave up today. Then I received a reminder of why I fight. It's not just for me, but for all those who will come after. I must hold fast. That night, for the first time in months, Sarah Whitford slept peacefully. And when she woke at dawn, she knew exactly what she needed to do. The next morning, Sarah woke with a determination she hadn't felt in months. She had made her decision overnight. It was time to stop taking it on the chin and take the initiative. She started by finding Luke in the kitchen, where he was silently drinking his morning coffee. "Luke," she said, sitting across from him, "we need to talk to James together." He looked up at her, surprised by the firmness in her voice. "You were right last night," she continued. "We have to hold on to what matters. And James matters more than our fears or our broken dreams." They found their son in the barn, brushing the horses with that tenderness he had always shown animals. When he saw them approach together, his face tightened, expecting another confrontation. "Son," Luke said, his voice rough with emotion, "Sarah helped me understand something. The strongest roots aren't those that chain you, but those that support you even from a distance." James stopped brushing the horse and turned to them, incredulous. "If Chicago is your dream, then go," Luke continued. "But know that this farm will always be your home, and we will always be proud of you no matter what you accomplish." The young man's eyes welled up with tears. He dropped his brush and hugged his father. "Thank you, Dad. I'll come back. Not to take over the farm, but to see you so my kids can meet their grandparents." Sarah felt her heart warm. They had just saved their family. Now, they had to save their future. That same afternoon, she went to Black River with a specific mission. Among her personal belongings, she had kept all the documents related to the stallion's death, the testimonies of the employees present, the details of the treatment administered, and most importantly, a crucial piece of information she had discovered rereading her notebook. Mitchell received her in his office looking grim. "Sarah, I don't know if it's a good idea for you to be here. Corman is pressing me to fire you for good." "Thomas," she said, placing her documents on the desk, "I found something. Look at these notes I took the day before the stallion died." She opened her notebook to a specific page. "Do you see this observation? Elias Corman observed the treatment from outside the stall, asked insistent questions about the remedies used. He was there, Thomas. He knew exactly what I was doing." Mitchell frowned. "What are you getting at?" "A man who denounces the incompetence of a treatment he observed in detail. Doesn't that strike you as suspicious? Either he knew my treatment was correct and he's deliberately lying, or he has veterinary knowledge he's hiding. She then pulled out an official paper. I wrote to the veterinarian in Sioux Falls for his opinion on the case. Here's his response. My care was perfectly appropriate. The stallion's death was due to a rare disease, impossible to diagnose without an autopsy. Mitchell examined the documents, his expression gradually changing. Sarah, you think Corman deliberately let that animal die to harm you? I think Elias Corman knows more about veterinary medicine than he lets on. And I think he saw a golden opportunity to destroy me. The confrontation took place on a Sunday evening in June, in the crowded community hall where Elias Corman held his weekly meetings. Sarah had waited for this moment, meticulously preparing her strategy. She entered discreetly while Corman was lecturing on the necessity of putting everyone in their place according to divine will. Women who abandon their homes for men's activities, he proclaimed in his melodious voice. Sow chaos in the natural order. Look at the consequences. Death, ruin, family division. Mr. Corman, Sarah interrupted, standing up, her clear voice resonating in the sudden silence. May I ask you a question? All heads turned to her. Corman, surprised but maintaining his confident smile, nodded. Naturally, Mrs. Harris. You witnessed the treatment of the Black River stallion. You seem very knowledgeable about veterinary practices for someone who preaches that women have no place in them. Where did you acquire this knowledge? A murmur rippled through the assembly. Corman lost his composure for a fraction of a second. Any man of good sense can judge competence. Really? Sarah pulled out her brown leather notebook and opened it. Allow me to read my notes from February 12th. E. Corman, concerned about digitalis dosage, suggests adding white sage, questions frequency of bleedings. Those are very technical terms for a mere observer, wouldn't you say? The silence in the hall was now complete. Sarah continued, her voice gaining assurance. I did my own digging, Mr. Corman. You studied veterinary medicine in Chicago for 2 years before dropping out. You had the knowledge necessary to save that animal, but you chose to let me shoulder that responsibility alone. That's a lie, Corman cried out, but his voice had lost its arrogance. And as for your influence over the First Territorial Bank, Sarah continued imperturbably, I discovered that your brother, Harold Pemberton, sits on the board of directors. A curious coincidence, wouldn't you say, that sudden demand for repayment? Indignant murmurs rose from the audience. Several people stood up, visibly troubled by these revelations. You're lying, Corman repeated, but his voice rang hollow now. No, Mr. Corman. I am telling the truth. And the truth is, you orchestrated this smear campaign because a competent woman threatened your influence over this community. Mitchell, who was present in the assembly, stood up. Sarah speaks the truth. I saw Corman observe that treatment with the eye of an expert, not a mere bystander. Other voices then rose up. Mary Hutchinson, who had come specially for the occasion, testified to Sarah's exceptional skills. Pastor Henley, who had remained silent until then, spoke. My brothers, my sisters, we may have let ourselves be blinded by fancy talk. Mrs. Harris's actions speak for themselves. She has saved more animals in 2 years than we had lost in 10. Elias Corman was now isolated, his charisma shattered by the truth. You don't understand, he stammered. The order and tradition have never justified lies and manipulation, Sarah firmly retorted. One by one, families began to leave the hall, many stopping to offer their apologies to Sarah. In a few minutes, Corman found himself almost alone with his last, most fanatical followers. The summer of 1889 brought with it a sweetness that Sarah hadn't felt in a long time. A year had passed since the confrontation with Corman, and the Dakota Territory seemed to have found its balance again. The guardians of the flock had scattered like morning mist under the sun's rays, their leader having left the region quietly after the scandal. The First Territorial Bank, under community pressure and after Pemberton's forced departure, had renegotiated Luke's mortgage under acceptable terms. But more than the regained financial stability, it was the peace that now reigned in the Harris home that warmed Sarah's heart. James had left for Chicago in the spring, but his letters arrived regularly, full of enthusiasm for his studies and tenderness for his parents. You gave me the greatest gift, he wrote in his last letter. The freedom to choose my own path while knowing I have a home to return to. The little house out back had become a proper veterinary care center again. But Sarah had expanded her mission. She now officially trained young assistants, creating what looked more and more like an informal school of animal medicine. Mary Hutchinson had become her first assistant, and other young women from the region regularly came to learn alongside her. One September morning, as the first leaves were starting to turn red, Sarah received a visit that surprised and deeply moved her. A delegation of farmers from 3 neighboring counties had come to see her with an extraordinary proposition. Mrs. Harris, their spokesman, an old man with rough hands, said, "We'd like to establish the first community veterinary care center run by a woman in the entire territory, with you at its head naturally." Sarah felt tears well up in her eyes. "Gentlemen, I'm not officially a doctor." "You're better than a doctor," the man replied with a smile. "You're a healer. And most importantly, you're someone we trust." That evening, Sarah and Luke sat on the steps of their porch, watching the setting sun tint the fields golden. The air carried that particular crispness of early autumn, mingled with the lingering lavender scent that always drifted from the little house. "Do you realize what's happening to us?" Luke whispered, taking his wife's hand. Sarah pulled out her brown leather notebook, that faithful companion that had seen her through every storm. She opened it to the last written page and read aloud. September 15th, 1889. Today I was offered the chance to lead the first community veterinary center in the territory run by a woman. I think of that winter night when I waited for a train that never came, convinced my life was over. I didn't know then that endings can be new beginnings. She closed the notebook and smiled. We sowed in the storm, Luke. Now we're harvesting in the sunshine. Did this story move you? Don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel to discover more inspiring tales. Like this video if it touched you, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Your support helps us continue sharing these stories of courage and hope. In the years that followed, Sarah Whitford Harris's name became legend throughout the Dakota, but she never officially became a doctor. What she built far surpassed any titles, a legacy of knowledge, courage, and hope that inspired generations of women to never give up on their dreams, even in the fiercest storms.